Hello again. I do not think it right that anybody, adult or child, should be discriminated against on the grounds of his or her religion. I think that everybody should be treated equally. However, that does not mean that I believe that some should be more equal than others. That is to say, treated with greater regard and their needs given special attention for fear of upsetting or offending them. All religions have some truth in them, and all are, at least in part, inspired by the Lord, but there is no one true faith. Christians, Hindus and Jews manage by and large to follow their religions without making too much of a song and dance about it in day-to-day life. Hindus do not eat beef for religious reasons, but that doesn't mean that they object to beef being served to others. Jews are prohibited by their own religion from eating pigs, but they don't insist that everybody else must abstain from eating pork. Hindus and Jews simply make their own arrangements, and when their children go to state schools, they do not demand that the school make any provisions for their children about food, prayer, or anything else. It's the same with Christians and Buddhists. They send their children to school and generally do not expect the school to change its ways to accommodate their religious beliefs. Religion is, after all, a personal matter. We shouldn't seek to impose our beliefs on others. The other day I made a video about Muslims in Scotland, who make up fewer than 2% of the population in that country. In the description to this video I give a link to the Education Authority in the Scottish city of Stirling's policy on cultural diversity and religious observance in their schools. It makes disturbing reading. Having said that, it's pretty typical of the kind of policy which applies to every school in Britain these days. We read that religious and cultural needs in meeting the religious and cultural needs of Muslim pupils, schools will recognise that cultural issues based on religion, such as modesty, the wearing of clothing with religious significance, and dietary needs, will affect some children in school. The next section says, schools are urged to bear in mind that parents may have strong reservations about the kind of relationships between boys and girls, particularly at the age of 10 and over, that are customary in our schools. They should also be aware that certain curricular activities of experience, such as health education, sports, arts and culture, in particular in mixed classes, and certain fundraising activities, including lotteries and gambling, may need careful consideration and discussion with parents. All this stuff about modesty, sports, arts, health education, and fundraising by lotteries only concerns Muslims. Nobody else. Prayer facilities. The authority expects that schools, particularly secondary, provide appropriate accommodation for Muslim young people to have access to a designated room for prayer, particularly for midday Friday prayers. School meals. It is important that schools respect the dietary regulations based on religious practice, for example, pig meat or meat not ritually slaughtered. All this is solely and exclusively about Muslims. Jewish parents who wish their children to keep kosher simply get them to take the vegetarian option at school dinners, or failing that, they send them with a packed lunch. I have never in all my life known or heard of a Jewish parent who expects that the whole school should be expected to keep kosher just for the sake of their own kids' perceived dietary needs. And yet almost every school in this country these days keeps halal in order to avoid upsetting Muslims. Why should this be? Dress and uniform. The authority recommends that schools should be sensitive to the basic principle of modesty, which informs the dress worn by Muslim girls in particular. What's more? Swimming. Adherence to the principle of modesty should guide the type of provision that is made for swimming, Where single-sex swimming is not available, the head teacher will consider parental wishes. Arts and culture. There are certain forms of arts activities which might raise issues for some parents and young people. Staff will be aware of sensitivities and make suitable arrangements. For example, certain forms of contact dancing and hymn singing. Every single aspect of school life in Stirling is dictated and guided by Muslim needs. No other religion is mentioned other than Islam. This is odd. I do not think that the religious needs of pupils should be considered. If parents feel that strongly about the matter, then they should either home educate their children or send them to a school run by the religion which they follow. I honestly don't see why state schools should be forced to observe the tenets of Islam in this way. It is a taste of what is to come because, of course, workplaces too and public bodies are also increasingly run in this way, with one eye on Islam at all times. Shocking state of affairs.